Hello, Trina.
Hi. Is that better?
Hello.
Hi.
So, thank you very much for joining me today. As I was saying, I've been watching you with a keen eye on Instagram. I actually joined it quite recently. Not sure why it took me so long to find it, but I eagerly follow your posts and I find it really interesting, really inspiring what you're doing. And I have my handy companion here, one of my
Ah,
best friends, I'm sure you'll recognize. So,
yes.
so today I'd like to chat with you about writing, but we're talking about writing, not writing novels or books, which is also great. But we're sort of more talking about the idea of journaling, keeping a diary, the importance of it, and all of this. And I really like what you share about this. So I think to start with, I would love to find out your journey. How did you get into journaling? When did you start? What drew you into what you're doing now? How did you discover in your life?
Writing. Oh, gosh. That's a lot. Well, I feel like I've always been a writer, but that can't possibly be true. So I always dated back to when I was around 9 years old. So that was kind of one of those pivotal points in my life that I remember, kind of like a historical stepping stone. I remember always being intrigued by or intrigued with literature and books. And when I was 9 years old, I specifically recall reading a book by, her name was Louise Fitzhugh, and she wrote a book called Harriet the Spy. And in Harriet the Spy, the protagonist, who was a little girl, and I could relate with that, she had one of those composition books. I think I have one here. Oh, actually, this isn't mine. This is a replica of one by an artist called Basquiat. But it's a notebook that looks like this that was very popular as a school notebook when I was a kid. And she wrote in one of those. And I remembered being intrigued by that and asking my mom for a notebook. Um, and after that, my journaling or writing, I never used to call it journaling. I always just called it writing. My writing has evolved and changed over time, but I don't think I've ever been without a notebook since that point in my life. So it started when I was about 9 years old.
And
Yeah.
so, and so, what now to this day? What continues to be your routine? Like, how does writing accompany you throughout the day, throughout your week? Because I know I've seen you on Facebook, on Instagram, mention your boys. You're a busy mom. Obviously, you have lots of things to do, and
A lot of things to do. You know, my journey on Instagram is just like a small snapshot, I think, into my life. My journey on Instagram began, I think, around 2 years ago. And it began as a social media experiment, actually. I teach at a university, Montclair State University, and I teach writing courses. Not personal writing, college writing, academic writing. And in one of my courses that particular semester, we were reading essays, and the topic was social media. And we decided to have an experiment where I would start a social media account. And we talked about, what it would be about. And it was just to see what would happen. And I didn't know much about Instagram at the time. A student of mine who was a photography major or a photography buff suggested it. And they always saw my notebook on my desk. And so it became, hey, let's use your notebook, right, as the topic, right, and because we had determined if an account had a central focus, that it would be more successful. And so we decided on my notebook, which I, at the time, thought was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard of. I mean, I was just like, okay, these kids are really, this is not going to turn out well. But, it was an experiment, so I went with it. It was their assignment. And me not being as savvy as they are, did not realize that people could read what was on the page because I only read Instagram from my phone.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And it was very tiny. And I think years ago you couldn't zoom.
Yeah.
Right? So, for a while it seemed like I usually just took photos of the outside of my notebook, stacks of notebooks and things like that. And then one day I opened up my notebook and took a photo of the page, and I got responses based on the content of the page. So that was not initially intentional. The sharing was not. It was not initially intentional. And so once that happened, I really had to take a step back and think about how much I wanted to share with the public, and what my purpose for sharing with the public would be, because I didn't want to just spill my guts out, right, to the world. I needed to have a reason for doing so that I thought, just because of who I am, would be helpful, because I was still very much in the teacher frame of mind at that particular point in time, because that's how the whole thing began. It was part of a college course I was teaching. And so I gave it a lot of thought as to what I wanted the message to be, what I wanted it to be about. Simultaneously, at the same time, I happened to be going through what was a very sudden and traumatic separation in a very long marriage. And so when my page was opened like that, that was what was on the page. And so it was as if the universe made the whole thing happen. And so women and people who were also going through struggles, difficult times, read what I wrote, and connected with that. And because that resonated with people, I really sat down and thought about the fact that, writing for me had always been a very solitary, personal kind of reflective exercise. And yet teaching writing, right, in a college setting had always been my way of giving, my gift to the world. But then I saw another opportunity of giving writing, but in a more personal respect, because it has, over the years, been a survival tool for me. And so that was the focus of it, initially, as a survival tool, because that's the frame of mind I was in at the time. That being said, over the years, it hasn't always been that. Like, it has been a tool for creativity. It has been a tool for, documenting exciting things that have happened. It's been a tool for planning, all kinds of things. So, while it started out as kind of, a survival kind of message, I think it has expanded a bit in the couple of years that the account has been up. So I hope that answers the question, because it kind of started as a mistake.
And so now, for example, when do you write? What's your favorite time to write? Do you have a special time? Is it throughout the day? Is it in the morning? What's your sort of writing ritual? What works best for you, you found?
I don't know if they have the same personality typings in Spain. I'm referred to as type A. Very disciplined, very orderly. That's probably how I would be described by most people. I very much believe that certain routines are important for my well-being, and so my writing happens pretty much every morning. I get up usually between 4:45, sometimes 4:15 if I have an early morning client. I sometimes have a client who trains here at my house at 5 in the morning. Wow. So I'll get up at 4:15, but typically I get up around 5. And I usually take that first hour when I don't have a client to write. And I also try to work out some during that time. So that's my early morning writing. Mm-hmm. And then my notebook, like for 41 years of my life, because I'm now 50, I don't think people have seen me very often without a notebook. So I always say I write for the first time early in the morning, but I also write throughout the day. So
it's there with you always.
It's always with me. I have it with me right now. So
exactly.
I don't go very far without it. And, when I go to bed at night, it's on my nightstand. Mm. So, and my mother said when I was younger, I used to sleep with it in my bed. And sometimes I would knock it off and she would hear it thunk to the floor. So
it's many, many years of it keeping you company constantly throughout the day and throughout the night.
Yeah, I think of it as an extension of my brain. It gives me an opportunity to put, once things are on the page in writing, I don't have to keep
thinking about
spinning my wheels about them. And I think I would have that tendency as I see other people doing, dwelling on things, if I didn't write them down. Mm-hmm. So.
In your page and also in some of your posts, I noticed that you talk about different techniques for writing. So sometimes if people have a certain block or don't even know how to start to sort of deconstruct a certain issue or a certain problem that they have. And then you talk about mind mosaic is one of the ones I've seen. I saw on your website you have something called unsent letters, which I just love even the name of it. And then a couple of days ago, you posted something about doing community writing as a technique where you join. I just thought it was the most interesting thing I've ever heard. So I just thought I wanted to ask you about it. How do you find these different techniques helpful? I suppose what's the rationale and reasoning behind them?
I think a lot of I've always considered myself, I guess, a writer in also the public sense of the word writing, because I do some writing, for magazines and things like that. And I've been an English teacher for a long time. So some of my writing techniques are actually techniques that I would teach in the classroom, right? Some of them are techniques that I use in the classroom. And some of them have probably evolved from my being a teacher, though some of them, I guess, are probably strictly for journal writing. My goal has always been finding and allowing, for myself, finding ways of entering into writing. Mm-hmm. I've probably read everything. No, not everything, but I've read a lot of books about expressive writing. Because I'm an academic, I've read a lot of scholarly, articles about expressive writing and personal writing on the therapeutic level. Mm-hmm. And I've also, been trained to teach writing, more rhetorical writing than anything. But, a lot of that can bridge into personal writing. Mm-hmm. So it's just been kind of a kind of organic evolution of just different ways to allow myself to grapple with issues and address certain things from an emotional and psychological, point of view on the page. And so, just sitting there and thinking, how can I? And some of the things have come from, like I said, different books and, articles, and some of it not having to do necessarily with writing, but then I will try to think, well, how can I make this into, how can I turn this into a writing technique? It's like a therapeutic technique that a therapist would use in the office, but how can I use it on myself in writing, right? And I'll try to figure that out, because I often think of my notebook writing as self-therapy. Right? Yeah.
So something like that, for example, community writing, like you were inviting people, given I suppose, some of the recent news things in the US and everything like that, certain tensions and things, you were inviting people to do a community writing session. Like, how does it work, for example, something like this?
The shared writing experience is really simple, actually. It's been effective. I think that the impetus behind that is that, writing is such a solitary thing, right? And I think one of the biggest problems that we have as human beings in this particular day and age is being so isolated from one another. And initially, and I tend to be very shy. Even though I'm a teacher, people are like, "You're an introvert?" And I'm like, "I think so. I think I'm an extroverted introvert." People will see me on Instagram and try to connect with me, but really it's just through comments and posts. And so I wanted to give people an opportunity not to just take a class with me, because that's an entirely different thing, but just for us to be in the presence of one another, writing about a similar topic, real time, together, and having the opportunity to, if we choose, share some of what we've written. And
it gives meet face to face, like in a cafe, or is it an online gathering, or how does it work?
This is online. Tonight, it's called a Peace Circle. It will be online. It gives people the opportunity to meet from all over, right? And I'll use my online classroom so that I can turn on their webcams and we can meet that way. I have done workshops face to face, and just being in the same space with someone and spilling your heart out on paper, but being able to look up at another person who's doing the same thing. It becomes a bonding experience. It becomes a bonding experience. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. And there's something very powerful about it, because people tend to write things they wouldn't necessarily say, right? And so they're doing that, but they see other people doing the same thing, and it just, I think, on a very human level, right? We start to feel connected to one another, and safe around each other. I know I think the last time I had one, it was around a similar issue, and it had to do with race. I think so. Either race or the election, whatever it was. People from all over, people who perhaps would not have chosen to speak to one another in any other setting. Right? People of different races, people of different political views, people of different orientations made the decision to come together and write privately, but in the presence of other people, about something that was very personal, but also very volatile. And then when given the opportunity to speak, shared some of what they'd written, which was an extremely risky thing to do, given the topic, but in the most respectful and caring of ways. There was no one shouting, no one being insulting, and I think when we write, we collect our thoughts in an organized manner. Right? We're not arguing with someone and trying to get our point across. We're being very introspective and very reflective. And then when we come out of that and we're in the presence of other people, I think we are sometimes our best selves. Right? And giving people the opportunity to be their best selves with other people. I just find it so powerful, and I know that when they walk away and they go back out into their lives, you know, they've experienced something that's special, and you know, they can take that with them in their hearts.
And unsent letters? What is unsent letters?
Unsent letters can be many things, I have found. Unsent letters are letters that you write that you never have the intention of sending. So they can be letters about positive things, but they can also be letters about negative. So it varies what a person might decide to write an unsent letter about. But, you know, when we write a letter to someone, it's a form of communication and expression. It's like a one-sided conversation, right? But you can kind of, I mean, you're still engaging with the other person whenever you write a letter, with the hopes that you get a response, right? In this case, you're not going to get a response, but there is something extremely therapeutic and cathartic about saying what you need to say. So sometimes the letters that people write are letters to people with whom they're in conflict with. Sometimes they're letters to people that they've lost contact with, that they're actually never going to be able to send that letter because they don't know where that person is. But they still need to have some sense of closure or some sense of communication. Sometimes it's a letter with a higher being. People write letters to God, and of course we can't send those, but those are that's another way. And sometimes I've had people write letters to people who are deceased, that they have lost the opportunity to have direct communication with. But unsent letters can be an opportunity to express what you need to express. And just that process itself can be very helpful and allow people to the opportunity to like move ahead in their thinking.
And what about your role, I suppose, with your, you know, the platform that you have for engaging with people, the coaching side of it? How can it be? How can it assist someone if someone is, for example, curious about the different services that you offer as a coach? Who is it for, and how can it add to someone's writing experience?
Mainly what I've done in terms of private coaching is more like accountability coaching. So it's kind of, you know, what I do in my classes or courses, but on a one-on-one level, and really trying to grapple with, you know, usually it's someone who has a conflict or some kind of a problem or some sort of specific goal in mind that they're not able to reach. And we try to figure out, you know, past, present, or future, you know, what the issues are, you know, either what the roadblocks are or what the hopes are. And then use different writing techniques that will help us or help them, you know, try to navigate these, you know, emotions or, you know, issues that are standing in the way. And, you know, by me being there, you know, I'm also a personal trainer and a teacher. A lot of times, you know, just from experience, you know, I know that my students aren't going to read the material that is on the syllabus unless I tell them to read the material. And then even if it's on the syllabus, they're not going to read it unless they know there's going to be a test or they know there's going to be a paper, right? And the same thing with my personal training clients. I can say, you know, this is how many times you should exercise per day. This is, you know, how many, you know, reps you should do. This is the way. But a lot of people aren't going to do it unless I'm standing there saying, you know, go, 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 you can do it. So a lot of it is just being there and holding someone else accountable, but also just being able to recognize the different techniques that we might be able to use together
Mm-hmm.
to get people to either be honest with themselves about certain things, right? Because a lot of times we have trouble with that.
Yes.
Just being truthful with ourselves, facing our fears,
Mm-hmm.
you know, things like that. Because usually when everything is going hunky-dory, right, no one actually needs me. It's when there's an issue that people are looking for to do the kind of thing that I do. So just helping people navigate the writing terrain and get past those blocks, because they're also thinking blocks. Like when people have trouble writing, it's oftentimes because they're having trouble letting go, right? In the mind, like in their brain, right? And there's just different ways to go about doing that.
And so for anyone who, after listening to our chat, gets really curious, maybe they haven't touched a notebook to write, you know, all these things for a while, or maybe they used to journal when they were a teenager, you know, all these things, and then you sort of forget your diary. What would you say as a sort of final farewell words? What would you say is a good place to start? Any final pieces of advice?
I always tell people in my newsletter to write every day. I mean, I just think that I know we're not all the same, and we don't all, not the same things resonate with us all. But I do think that we can all benefit from some sort of reflection and some sort of introspection. I think we owe it to ourselves. I think it's a type of self-care.
Yeah.
And I think that we are better people in the world when we are better people, inside for ourselves. And, so, I mean, that's why I do it. And that's why I try to help other people do it, just so that we can just be in better places.
Trina, thank you so much. I'm going to add all your details, your website and your Instagram hashtag on the video. And I'm so thankful for taking this time to chat with you, and I look forward to connecting again. Let's keep writing.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.